The City of Roanoke completed its comprehensive plan, City Plan 2040, in 2020. The city worked with residents to create an authentic participation process to make sure they were included in the creation of the vision for our city going into the future. The city worked with focus groups, surveys, working groups, and public meetings to engage the community about what they liked about the city and what they wanted to see change in the future. A big part of that conversation was about housing and the need for different types of housing and housing choice in our community. The comprehensive plan had a big focus on missing middle housing, the idea that we have a lot of single-family housing within the community and a lot of larger apartment buildings, but really had a gap for those units in between. So when you think about townhouses, courtyard apartments, or smaller apartment buildings, they fill an important niche within our community that help people find the housing that's the right size, right level of affordability for them. So as we go forth, we're working to change our text amendments to allow these types of housing more freely within our community.
I've lived in Roanoke all my life. I moved to the Raleigh Court neighborhood after finishing college in 1977. Started out in a one-bedroom apartment, moved to a two-bedroom apartment, then to a duplex, got married, bought a house, got divorced, moved into a townhouse, bought a smaller house, now got remarried and lived in here on Laburnum Avenue now for 13 years. Plan to stay here until they put us in the home. I think it's one of the great things about the Raleigh Court neighborhood in that there's such a variety of housing types and sizes. There's something for virtually anyone's income and needs, depending on their stage of life. You can live your entire life, adult life, as I have, here in the neighborhood and never moved more than 7 or 8 blocks.
Roanoke, like other communities in the United States, are finding that their zoning ordinances are barriers to housing development. And in fact, much of Roanoke's land area is zoned for only one single type of housing. So we have opportunity to develop new housing in some of those areas if we were to expand the options for different housing types in those neighborhoods.
So we're here at the rescue mission at the women's shelter. This is one of our emergency shelters in the community for folks experiencing homelessness. So zoning reform is really important to our work in addressing homelessness in the community because it creates housing options, especially for low-income populations. With rents increasing, with less supply, it makes housing less affordable for those with limited income and limited resources. So the more we can increase housing supply as a community, the more it will impact our ability to effectively address homelessness. So the more units we create, the more opportunities we create in the city, the more opportunities that our low-income populations will have to really access safe, affordable, and accessible housing in the community.
So when someone has what we call cost burdening and is spending more than 30% of their income on rent, then they're very close and right on the edge and vulnerable to becoming homeless because one car repair or some unexpected bill could cause them to not be able to pay their rent or for groceries for that matter. So that's a real problem that we want to address here in the city.
As far as our housing situation is concerned, it's about affordable housing. I think that we should actually look at preserving the housing that we have and do rehabilitation rather than to focus so much on new development because it is becoming almost ineffective. We can't afford it.
So we need more houses, we need more apartments, and we need them to be affordable.
Ultimately, looking at this, possibly it will have an impact, but possibly it won't. I'm not sure if just increasing the number of units addresses the systemic issues which really underlie a lack of access to affordable housing.
So here at the city, we know that there is a deficit in affordable housing units, especially for those who are considered extremely low income. With zoning reform, we know that this can reduce barriers into affordable housing production and increase housing options for those that really need it most.
One of our strategies is to try to open up more of the city's land area to different types of housing in hopes that developers will come along in the private sector and develop more housing units to relieve that shortage. So we have already been working on the front and opened up many of our commercial districts to new residential development. And now we're looking at our residential zones and the types of housing that have been traditionally restricted to single family zoning.
Planning staff is proposing amendments that will remove exclusionary zoning practices and remove regulatory barriers to creating housing opportunities throughout the city. Specifically, our proposals include simplifying the use table to remove regulating by housing type and instead list dwellings as a permitted use in all districts. The number of dwellings permitted per lot will be regulated through supplemental regulations related to specific housing types and through the dimensional regulations for the districts. The proposed code will classify specific dwelling types in order to manage form, location, and orientation of new buildings so they will be most compatible within the existing fabric of our neighborhoods. Another proposal makes changes to the dimensional regulations of residential zoning districts to allow for the more efficient development of the limited vacant land within the city. An example of the changes that are proposed include the reduction of lot area per dwelling unit requirements and the reduction of minimum lot sizes.
Property I have in the city, parking is sometimes an issue now with my current tenants. I'm concerned with whether we're going to have enough space if we're starting to build new structures.
To address equity in housing, the city is proposing updates to certain terms within the zoning ordinance. First, the term household will be added. This amendment will combine the city's current definition for family, federally required living arrangements, and non-family living arrangements into a simplified household definition. Second, various group care facility types will be consolidated into a single use defined as group living. This amendment will focus on governing land use rather than the background and status of individual residents. Lastly, the use transitional living facility will be replaced with small-scale community housing services and large-scale regional housing services. This amendment will remove barriers to temporary housing in appropriate districts.
Many of our most beloved neighborhoods within the city of Roanoke have many types of housing with them on the same street. For example, on the street behind me, single family with accessory dwelling unit, duplex, and multifamily work well because the form, scale, massing, and public facades relate well to one another. These housing types should have consistent setbacks, building scale, and front facades with a clearly definable entrance and ample glazing.
If there is a housing shortage, and it's well documented that there is, then anything that can add to the housing availability without tremendously increasing the costs and without increasing the environmental impact, where you're clearing land for brand new housing, I think that could be a good idea.
These changes you guys are considering implementing are such a huge help to us because, prior we were not able to it wasn't even a thought to consider an ADU, but that we could consider, a duplex on one of our lots, and that would just really help out with this crisis, the shortage.
Having multiple housing types within the same neighborhood allows people to live within the same community in the form of housing that best meets their needs at each stage of life.
So what I'm hoping is that by doing a change like this, it creates more housing for young people, and if the young people elect to move to Roanoke because there are more housing options for them, then that's a terrific thing for Roanoke.
It's going to take some effort because so much of the city, like the part I grew up in off of Peters Creek Road, is all one housing type. Where I grew up, everything was a brick ranch, 2 or 3 bedrooms. And it's going to be hard to integrate a broader variety of housing types into that sort of neighborhood. But I think it's really worth the effort because, again, it gives people an opportunity to anchor themselves in a particular part of town. They can grow up through the various stages of life in the place they grew up in, where their brothers and sisters and their mother and father lived. And I think there's really something important about that, to have more opportunities for Roanoke City to offer that type of spaces for its residents.